Hey, so this is going to be a repeat of a video I just did. The audio didn't turn out so well. I think I had the mic settings wrong or something, so I'm trying it again here. Also, I just think some things about the video didn't turn out like I wanted them to, so I'm just quickly redoing it. As the title suggests, this is an atheist answers to common Christian questions. And these are picked from a number of different websites, one called thecarm.org and another one called adherentapologetics.com. So here we go. These are going to be just really basic questions and then some that are a little bit odd. But starting off with some of the basic ones, how do you define your atheism? Do you affirm or deny agnosticism regarding God's existence? Why do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold? Well, I mean, I would define my atheism as it suggests as a lack of theism. I'm really more of an anti-theist. I actually believe religion is harmful for the world, and I believe in general we're better off with less of it. But I call myself an atheist because most people don't know what an anti-theist is. Um, I oh yeah, I also technically would be an agnostic too because we're all technically agnostics since we cannot know that there is no God, just like Christians do not know that there is one. Of course, that does not invalidate the term Christian or atheist. It just means one does not believe and one does believe. It's a common argument Christians use against atheists to try to say, well, you're all agnostics. No, that's not true. Unless you mean that all of us are agnostics, including Christians. But anyways, not to play this word salad game forever, that's just what Christians will normally try to mean when they try to separate agnosticism and atheism. But moving on, um, well, why is your atheism a justifiable position to hold? Well, that's too broad of a question to really answer, other than just to say that I have a number of reasons for believing that there is no God or gods, just like some Christians have their reasons for believing in one, and that really should be a simple enough reason why a person can be an atheist. It's really not that complicated. Do you have proof of the non existence of the Christian Trinitarian God? I don't know why they had to specify the Christian Trinitarian God there. That's a weird way to put it. But, anyways, well, technically, no. But as Christopher Hitchens, one of my icons, would say, that which can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without it. The same is true of all other gods. Anything that is by definition supernatural can't be disproven. So it's impossible to entirely disprove the God. However, there's a lot of reason to suggest that the accounts of the Christian God and many other gods are implausible, are irrational, and are also just flat out made up. So that's, I guess, what I could say as a general summation of why I think the Christian God is made up. If it could be shown to you that atheism refutes itself, would you abandon it? I guess maybe. See, the problem is then you'd have to show me what religion was correct, and not just like if Christianity was correct. There's many denominations within Christianity, so it's not as simple of a question as you think. But I mean, if you could emphatically and undeniably prove one religion true, yeah, I would convert to it. Sorry, the questions are pulled up here, so I have to scroll down a little bit. Okay. Do you affirm or deny that evil exists? I affirm it. I believe evil exists, and many of my definitions of evil would be the same as Christians. Um, do you affirm or deny that good and evil exist? Okay, that's actually, I apologize, that's just a repeat question. Do you affirm or deny that there are absolute morals? Um, no, I deny it. I think there are morals that are almost near absolute. I guess the best way to put it is it's kind of like in science how there are hypotheses, theories, and laws. Um, there are some things I think that are near absolutes. But I don't believe there is an absolute, unchangeable, unquestionable objective morality. No, but I wouldn't say that it's kind of in the sense that like the theory of gravity will, or the theory of gravity, yeah, or I mean, it's a theory, but it's almost certainly true. And I think that's the thing about a lot of moral absolutes that are not technically absolutes but are subjective. They're just 99% true. I mean, 99% uh, of people would agree on them under 99% of circumstances, so they're almost near objective, such as, that Nazism is evil, or Hitler was a bad person. But moving on, are morals the constructions of societal norms? Yes, they are. Are morals the constructions of individual decisions? Also, yes, they are. On what basis do you ground your morality? Pretty much just the same ones that everyone does. Personal experience, my personal psychology, philosophy, rationality, and maybe a little bit of just personal bias thrown in there, but nothing overly complicated. Do you affirm or deny that? Okay, sorry. Do you affirm or deny that there can only be one moral authority? No, I deny that. I guess if the Christian version of this question is true, then yeah, there could only be one moral authority. But they say, of course, God is the only moral authority. But I don't think that's possible because I don't think there's a God. And if there are gods, I think even if there was a God, there's no guarantee it's the Christian God. So I think there could still be multiple authorities even within that framework. So I definitely deny that. Okay, and then moving over to some of the questions from adherent apologetics. Where does consciousness come from? Consciousness is just the result of our brains. There is no soul as Christians define it. I believe, the soul of both humans and animals is just the result of our brain. The only difference is humans' brains are much more developed than animals' brains in certain regards. It's hard to believe, I know, and trust me, I like animals better than people. But humans are a lot smarter, and that extra difference of rationality and, sentient consciousness we define as the soul. But yeah, that's all it is our brains. Why do you lack a belief that God exists, or would you say that God does not exist? I don't know. I would say, I guess, I believe that God does not exist. Yeah, it's a well-founded belief with rationale behind it, but it's a belief, yeah. Do you believe that Zeus exists, or do you believe that Zeus does not exist? I believe Zeus does not exist, thus why I'm an atheist. Zeus is also a deity. If you lack a belief that Zeus exists, why are you centuries behind the rest of the world who say that Zeus does not exist? I don't know. I have no clue. Checkmate atheist. I guess I can't answer that one. Do you act according to what you believe or what you just lack a belief in? Both. I act according to my beliefs in certain teachings, like the beliefs in the intelligence and the rationality of Friedrich Nietzsche's teachings, but I also act according to what I have a lack of belief in, and not just the lack of belief in a God. I have a lack of belief that, well, let me put it this way. I don't believe it's impossible that there are aliens out there, but I do not believe aliens are going to invade our planet tomorrow and eat us all or conquer us like in the movie Independence Day, or I don't know. I'm trying to think of a more recent movie than that, but I don't know. Yeah, I lack a belief in that, and that does also shape my opinions. So both. Is atheism a worldview? Yes. And actually, I might contradict some other atheists on this one, because some atheists say atheism is not a worldview, and technically they're right because it is just a lack of theism. But let's face it, it is actually a worldview. You have, by abstaining specifically from religion, it's fundamentally different than religions. By nature, it's a different worldview. I know this is not the best analogy in the world, but it's kind of like bald is a haircut. Bald is still technically considered a hairstyle, but it's much different than other hairstyles because of a very obvious missing element that other hairstyles have. Well, atheism is a worldview, but it is not a religion, I will say that. It is not a religion, but it is a worldview. If not, what is your worldview? That's not relevant. What would convince you that God exists? A very overwhelming amount of scientific, moral, historical, rational, and just otherwise overwhelming amounts of evidence. Plus, I wouldn't make my mind up overnight. I didn't do it, as a Christian. Why should I do it as an atheist? I mean, it wasn't until age 25-ish, 26-ish that I became an atheist, indoctrinated with religion for roughly 20 or so years. It took me a long time and many, many years of peeling away the emotional and intellectual indoctrination I'd underwent. I'm not going to undo that overnight. If I discovered that any religion was true, I would convert to it, but it would have to be like 110% certain, and that's not going to happen easily. And with Christianity, I would say it's near impossible because I've seen enough of that one to know that it's not true. If Jesus rose from the dead, would you become a Christian? Maybe. You'd still have to prove which version of Christianity was correct, but I would say probably not, but maybe. It's kind of hard to say. If he wouldn't become a Christian, why would you ever accept that he rose from the dead? Well, I mean, like I said, I used to be a Christian, and one thing that really troubled me a lot back when I was one is that there are different versions of Christianity that have different versions of how to go to heaven and hell, that have different versions of right and wrong. And to be honest, just being a Christian doesn't solve all your moral dilemma. You have to still keep peeling back all the layers. So yeah, it's possible, but I would say it's not likely. Why do atheists keep insisting that faith is blind trust when that's not what Christians or the Bible say? Well, because it mostly is. I mean, Christians openly brag about their level of faith and blind trust. They are proud of it. If a Christian says, if a Christian is disproven in an argument by an atheist, they'll simply respond like, well, I have faith. And you atheists just rely on your mind and on evidence, and you have no heart or something like that. That's usually what the response is, and they take pride in blind faith. Now, not all Christians are as blind as others, but yeah, they give us good reason to make that accusation. Whereas our faith, if you want to call it that, or atheist lack of faith, is usually rooted in much, much better reason than a Christian's faith is. So I guess that's the best way to answer that. Why do you want material evidence for an immaterial God? Well, I live in a material world, and this immaterial God has a weird way of giving commandments to his material followers that impact others' material lives. So thusly, I do care about the material impact of this immaterial God's commandments. Is there a purpose to life? Not one big absolute one, no. But I mean, I believe there's a lot of things that are purposes that are similar in nature from different people's lives that all of us find to be, at least somewhat relatable to each other. So I believe there are purposes in life, definitely, but not in the sense like it's a one-size-fits-all that we all have the same purpose in life. How do you determine what is right and wrong? The same way I did back when I was a Christian. I just don't use ancient documents, invisible deities, or let raving idiots in cathedrals or mosques or churches tell me what it is. Other than that, it's not much different. And instead I also reference the works and writings of actual philosophers and actual people that seem moral and right to me, or just people I flat out like. Not even always intellectuals, sometimes just people in day-to-day life that I meet that I like. And yeah, that's the way I did as a Christian. Now I'm just honest with myself about it. When a lion kills a cub from another pride because that's what natural selection has raised it to do, is that morally acceptable? I guess not by human standards, not if the lion was a registered citizen of the United States, I would not say so. If he had to vote and pay taxes and all that we do. But within the wild, it's acceptable to some extent because that's just the way the laws of the jungle work. So I guess I'm okay with it, but not if the lion was a human. If evolution has put a sense of morality into us to help us survive, what makes our actions any better than any other animal's actions? We aren't, for the most part. In fact, some humans are much worse than animals. Hitler was worse than any animal that ever lived. Stalin was mostly worse. Some humans are better. Some humans you know, I guess I would, well, I mean, I'm trying to think of someone other than Nietzsche. I keep hopping back to Nietzsche. Heck, Isaac Newton wasn't an atheist, but, he did a lot of great things for the world. Uh, Galileo, they did great things for all of us. And then there were heroes who fought, and risked their lives to protect us too, the heroes who defeated Hitler and Stalin. So yeah, humans can do great things and evil things. So yeah, we're both better and worse than animals in a way. Is it morally acceptable for you to kill a toddler because you can no longer financially support it? Oh yeah, this is an evolution, or this is an abortion question. And then the next one is it morally acceptable to kill a fetus in the womb because you couldn't financially support it? I don't know. I'm kind of a moderate on the issue of abortion. I would not say I'm a hardcore person one way or the other on it. I lean a little more pro-choice than pro-life, but it's too complicated to get into it any further. And really, the fact that this is tied to the issue of religion, though, shows a little bit of how distorted that issue is these days in the United States. And it also shows where religion is getting its nose in an area where it doesn't belong. So I think it shows that religion does have its nose in this. But I do lean a little more pro-choice than pro-life. But all I would say is this: I don't know where life begins, but I don't really see why that's an issue that's directly connected to the belief in God. Who is Jesus? Jesus of Nazareth was an individual that lived roughly, I believe they say it was, gosh, it's embarrassing, I'm slightly forgetting, but it was around, the early AD years, or I forget, maybe it was the, last bit of the BC years, but whatever the case is, he lived during the Roman Empire, and during the peak of the Roman Empire. He was probably a real person. I mean, there's a lot of historical reason to believe he was, though some don't think he was. He probably was crucified. He probably, did exist, and probably most of the accounts of his life are true. Some of the accounts in the Bible are probably true, but they're not holy. They're not infallible, and he was not the Son of a God. He was not resurrected, and his teachings were not infallible. That's why I see Jesus as just another guy who probably left a positive impact in the world, but nothing that hasn't been topsed 1,000 times over. Why did his disciples die saying that he rose from the dead? That's actually kind of an interesting one. They're saying, why would you sacrifice your life for a cause that you know to not be true? Or why would you sacrifice, or why, I guess, would you go to such an extreme unless you were sure of something? Well, I mean, that is actually kind of an interesting question because it happens a lot in history. People have died for causes that maybe weren't not necessarily right. I mean, people have died for, good causes like, democracy. People have died for controversial causes that some people think are, in the middle, like communism. Some people love it, some people hate it. And then some people have died for evil causes like Nazism. And they died believing they were serving, some greater good in the world. It's sad but true. And if you don't believe me, read a history book. Not that I'm saying Christianity is the equivalent of Nazism, but I mean, I think a lot of his disciples did believe that Jesus was the Son of God. I think some of them maybe didn't. I don't know. I mean, I definitely am a little bit into territory I'm not sure on here. But I think some of them believed he was the son of God, some of them didn't. And I think essentially, maybe for the ones who weren't certain if he really was the son of a God or died on the or was resurrected, they had already been following him around. They'd been his disciples, and maybe they just figured that was the wagon they'd already hitched their horse to, you know. Or I think maybe it goes the other way around. The horse that they hitched their wagon to. Sorry. Yeah, but anyways, it is a little interesting, you know. I mean, but I don't necessarily think that the fact that the disciples might have potentially sacrificed their life in vain automatically validates Christianity. But it's an interesting concept. Okay, here's one that's definitely up my alley. Why do the bloodiest regimes in history, Mao's China, Nazi Germany, and Stalin's Russia, come from atheistic ideas? You know, no matter how many times, you know, atheists talk about this, no matter how many times they disprove it, no matter how many years pass with evidence to the contrary, we never, ever, ever get away from the fact that people always call the Nazis atheists. And even worse, they try to tie Nietzsche to Nazism, and that's another thing that I'm not going to get into now, but he wasn't. Um, yeah, Hitler wasn't an atheist. Okay, not that that really matters that much here. Hitler was a Catholic. He was probably more of a cultural Christian than anything. And to be fair, he wasn't a super religious guy. I've read Mein Kampf, which is a thing that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy should be a little careful to admit in some company. But I mean, it's not that I in any way I empathize with anything he wrote there. But he never once denied Christianity once in the book. In fact, he numerous times positively referenced it. Um, the Nazi platform was predominantly Christian. Most of the leading Nazis, usually when they spoke on religion, it was tepidly in support of it. And I'm aware there were some statements Hitler said at the end of his reign that were at least somewhat secular. You know, he frequently was very critical of the church if it got in the way of the Nazi regime. And one kind of weird quote he once said on religion was that he wished that Germany was more Shintoist, like Japan. That way that he would be treated like a god, like, you know, Emperor Hirohito was. Which I think mostly shows that Hitler just saw religion as something to be used. But again, that doesn't make him an atheist. So to be fair, Nazism was not derived from Christianity, but Germany was predominantly Christian. The Nazi Party was predominantly Christian, and yes, it was not an atheistic movement. You know, period. Moving on. Unfortunately, Christians will still keep using that argument, but it shouldn't be one. Now, communism is a different thing, of course. Yeah, of course, communism is predominantly secular. And as for why the crimes happened, well, being an atheist doesn't solve every problem in society. And that goes on both a personal and a macro level. You know, I mean, look at the look at the atheistic countries in the world. Are they all perfect? No. Are they all, you know, is everybody there perfectly happy and, you know, everything better? No, but on the whole, it's usually better off than a lot of other places. And as far as the communist regimes of the past went, well, if you want to say that being an atheist is what contributed, is the reason that, if you're looking to say like everything is attributable to atheists that happened just because that person was an atheist or that regime or ideology was atheistic, well, you have to basically say the same thing about every single Muslim, Christian that's lived throughout all of history, like Vlad the Impaler, Elizabeth Bathory, every corrupt king, queen, you know, sultan, you know, which of course all of the horrific tyrants and murderers of the past were not doing so because of religion. But you basically would have to apply that standard because that's what they're really doing is they're just saying the fact that the communists were secular means that everything they did is attributable solely to them being atheists. And I'm also aware that many of them will try to say things like, well, you know, communism's the main thing, the crimes that happened there were specifically attributable to atheism. It was really what led to the worst atrocities. No, it wasn't. And it disgusts me that you even hear people try to go that direction. Okay, let's just take a little brief sampling of it if you don't believe me, because I probably know more about Stalin than a person should, or about Hitler than a person should. Stalin, okay, some of his worst crimes that he committed. Well, when there was the famine in Ukraine and the forced, I guess you could say, where he basically forced a lot of people into starvation, that was in punishment for them not cooperating with his economic collectivizations. Above all else, it was just Stalin being Stalin. But if you had to pick anything after that, I would pick uh, mass scale collectivization and extreme concentration of power up in the hand of a tyrant. I don't know, totalitarianism. It's not, none of that has anything to do with atheism. Okay, and there were thousands of priests murdered by Stalin, but at least in terms of the overall scale of Stalin's crimes, it's pretty minor compared to the many millions of people he purged for other reasons, such as that they posed a risk to his power, including other communists. Um, for the many millions of Germans and Jews, people don't realize Stalin did actually commit ethnic um, crimes similar to what Hitler did. Maybe not on the same scale that Hitler did them, but he did commit many crimes against racial minorities in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Again, none of this really is connected to atheism, though. These are connected to mostly just Stalin being evil and to maybe some other flawed policies of communism in terms of politics and economics. The same with Mao. Mao's worst policies came from just horrible collectivization policies that even a lot of socialists don't endorse these days that led to mass starvations in China. It came from extreme anti Western ideology and the expulsion of even positive Western ideas. Again, not really I don't know that you could call any of that atheism. Now, again, not saying that the communists haven't done crimes against religious people, as communism is kind of an example of where atheists have gone wrong. But no, not everything done it was attributable to atheism. So enough of that. I know some people probably wonder why I spend so much time on that, but as someone who knows a lot about those ideologies, I just can't help but just get a little bit sore on that one and want to kind of push back on it because it just irritates me so much to hear people, as someone who is not a communist in any way, shape, or form, and certainly not a Nazi, I absolutely am disgusted when people will try to attribute those things to atheism and to the crimes of Stalin, Mao, and Hitler to atheism. It's just idiotic. Okay, but enough of that. Okay, what is your reason for rejecting Christianity? Well, it's pretty simple. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian school from pre-K to 12th grade, an extremely religious family. Um, and over those years, I took it relatively seriously, but I morally and logically found that nothing about it added up. And as I got older, it made less and less sense, not more and more. Once I got out of that world, it didn't take me long before I started exploring alternative ways of thinking. And admittedly, it mostly was just on the internet. I mean, I was a finance and accounting major in college, so that didn't, unlike some people who became atheists in college, that really didn't change my mind. So, yeah, about 6, 7 years out of high school, I became an atheist, and all of the 20 or so years of indoctrination pretty much were completely undone. And since then, I've only become more and more uh, dug in my atheist views because I've seen the incredibly weak, pathetic arguments Christians have thrown at me, as well as the horrible levels of prejudice and just personal attacks they levy at me. And it's reaffirmed to me that I am definitely in the right. If you were at one time a believer in the Christian God, what caused you to deny his existence? I already covered that one, sorry. Um, do you believe the world would be better off without Christianity? Yes. Yes. Much better off. I think it'd be much better off without all religions. I think if Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity were all three somehow to disappear tomorrow, the world would be a much more harmonious place. Going back like hundreds or thousands of years, that's a lot harder to say because, admittedly, you know, the world was so different back then that it's harder to guess exactly what it would have been like without religion I can say this. I think we would have been better off if maybe teachings of ancient philosophers rather than Christians had prevailed, and I think humanity would have progressed faster. But that's hard to say because I'm neither a historian nor am I a some great philosopher, but it's just my opinion, and I definitely could be wrong. Is the behavior of the God of the Old Testament morally wrong? I think so. Some people, well, let me put it this way. I mean, I don't think that rape, genocide, slavery, incest, I find those to be a little bit morally revulsive. But, if that's just me personally, I don't really like them. What would be sufficient evidence for you to believe in God's existence? Um, I think I already answered that one. This is just a rephrased version of that, of one I answered earlier. Okay. Can you disprove the Christian God's existence? Can you provide that proof here and now? And is reason sufficient to examine the truth claims of Christianity? I no, I mean I can't provide the proof of it now, other than say that I can't. Could you provide the proof that he does exist? Well, no, I can't provide instant evidence that he does not exist either. I do believe reason is sufficient to examine the truth claims of Christianity. I believe it's not that hard to figure out why they really don't make much sense. I think, in fact, really, that's something that confuses me was why so many people dig down on such irrational beliefs on this. But I think if people make a conscious effort, it doesn't take too hard. It doesn't take too long to figure out why the claims of Christianity are completely ridiculous. Okay, and getting down to the last few questions, I think I mostly asked them here. Okay. Must God be provable using the scientific method? Ideally. Um, I don't think, I mean, that would be very nice, but I don't think he has to. I mean, since he still is a supernatural entity, I don't think he must be, but yeah. But no, he doesn't have to be, but it would be nice. Do you affirm or deny that science can falsify God's existence? I think it can mostly. I mean, technically, science cannot disprove a God entirely, like I said, because he's supernatural. But, I mean, it can. Um, it can do a lot to help us realize that a lot of claims are not true, like the claims of Noah's Ark. If you have a basic knowledge of everything from just basic architecture and engineering of a boat that big and realizing why it couldn't float, as well as realizing why you can't fit two of every species onto it and why this could not survive a global flood. Yeah, that can disprove that claim, and it can go a long way to disprove other claims too. So yeah, I think that's really it. So hopefully I covered these questions relatively well. Hopefully this video turns out a little better than my last one in terms of both audio and in terms of just, I think, maybe answering the questions a little more clearly. But other than that, just thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye.